Why did she hesitate? The gun was already pressed against her head. The man holding it was shaking, desperate, starving. And yet she didn't flinch. Everyone in that dusty, roadside diner froze when the rifle clicked. It was the kind of sound that sliced through noise, through time itself. A spoon paused midair, the ceiling fan groaned above, and somewhere a child's small breath caught. The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment, as if the sun itself waited to see what she'd do. Lena didn't move. She didn't beg. She just stared forward, her fingers still wrapped around the chipped porcelain bowl. Steam rose from the rice and thin soup, curling up like ghostly hands. It was the first real meal she'd had in 3 days. And now a rifle demanded it. The soldiers had stormed in less than a minute ago. Boots slamming against the wooden floor, dust rising like smoke behind them. Men who hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't stopped running from the front lines. Their uniforms were shredded by shrapnel, their eyes hollowed out by something far darker than fatigue. These weren't just soldiers anymore. They were survivors of something monstrous. Their leader, a tall man with a scar slicing across his cheek, was the first to move. He spotted Lena's bowl and without a word, leveled his rifle. "Give it to me," he said. His voice cracked halfway through the command, not anger, hunger. For a moment she considered it. She'd seen eyes like that before. Eyes that didn't want to kill, just needed to live. But something in the room felt wrong. Tension, thick and heavy, clinging to the air like humidity before a storm. The farmers at the back of the diner didn't dare move. A mother clutched her child close, whispering prayers in a trembling voice. No one wanted to be next. Lena could hear her heartbeat, loud, steady, a drum inside her skull. She'd been on battlefields where artillery screamed and blood soaked the dirt. But this small moment of stillness was worse. Because here it wasn't chaos, it was choice. Hers. His. Everyone. She set the spoon down quietly. Her eyes never left his. And with slow, deliberate movements, she pushed the bowl toward him. But he didn't lower the rifle. He shoved her shoulder instead. "Stand up," he barked. "You think you're better than us." The scrape of her chair echoed through the silent room like a gunshot. She rose slowly, her face calm but her pulse racing. That child's soft sob in the corner broke through her fear. Something about that sound, fragile, human, innocent, lit a fuse inside her. She'd heard it before, in field tents, in villages after airstrikes. The sound of people breaking. "Better than you," she said softly. "No," she breathed, "just not empty anymore." His eyes flickered, confusion flashing through the rage. Her hand moved to her pocket, not for a weapon, but for a photograph. It was creased, faded, corners torn from years in the field. 4 men in uniform smiling, her brothers in arms. Men she had treated, patched, saved, and buried. "You see this," she whispered. "All of them gone. I fed them, I patched their wounds, and still they never came back. So if you need that food, take it. But remember, someone like me will have to clean up what you do next." The silence that followed felt sacred. No one dared to breathe. Even the ceiling fan seemed to pause mid-turn. The soldier's jaw clenched, his rifle dipped slightly. Something behind his eyes shifted, a flicker of the man he used to be. He looked at her, then at the bowl of food. Finally, slowly, he lowered his weapon. "Captain," one of the others whispered, "what are you?" "Quiet," he muttered, raising a hand. He sat right there in front of her, with the gun still hanging from his shoulder. He picked up the spoon and began to eat. No words, just silence. And when he was done, he set the bowl down gently, almost reverently. Then he did something no one expected. He reached into his pack, pulled out a tin of rations, old, dented, nearly empty, and placed it in front of her. For the next hungry soul, he said. The others hesitated. Then one by one they followed his lead. A dry biscuit, a half-filled canteen, a small pouch of beans. Tiny offerings, but in war, it might as well have been gold. And then, without another word, they turned and left. Their boots faded into the distance, swallowed by the desert wind. The diner stayed frozen. Even after they were gone, the silence held thick and trembling. Only the wind spoke now, brushing against the wooden walls. A soft, mournful sound. Lena stood there, heart pounding, staring at the small pile of food. Not much, but enough to mean something. A mother's voice broke the quiet. You could have died. Lena looked down at her hands, steady now, not shaking. I've already seen too much death, she said quietly. Sometimes the only way to survive it is to show mercy to those who have forgotten what it feels like. Outside, the horizon burned orange with the setting sun. Dust swirled across the road like restless spirits. And there, under the flickering diner light, that tin of rations sat gleaming, a small reminder that even in war, kindness still fought to live. Because mercy doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It just acts. But that wasn't the end of it. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. The desert wind carried distant echoes, gunfire, engines, faint screams swallowed by the hills. She lay on the cot behind the diner, staring at the cracked ceiling, the faint hum of generators far away. Something about that man, the scarred captain, wouldn't leave her mind. The way he'd looked at her before lowering the gun. The way his hands trembled when he ate. He wasn't a monster, he was a man unraveling. And she'd seen that unraveling before. Her thoughts drifted to the field hospital 6 months earlier. Bodies lined in rows, flies, mud, blood thick enough to smell even in memory. She'd been trying to save a boy that day, 17, maybe 18, when the sky tore open with artillery fire. The med tent collapsed, she barely crawled out. When she found him again, half his chest was gone. She still remembered his last words, tell them it wasn't their fault. She never knew who them was. But somehow, those words had stayed lodged in her chest ever since. Now, staring at the dim ceiling, she wondered if maybe the boy's words were meant for men like that captain. Men who had done terrible things, but not because they wanted to. Because war had chewed them up and spat them out hollow. Somewhere outside, a vehicle engine rumbled. Her eyes shot open. Voices. Low hurried, not local, military. She grabbed her jacket, slipped quietly toward the door, heart hammering in her chest. The faint glow of headlights washed across the diner's walls. She crouched behind the counter, peering through the slats. A convoy, 3 trucks rolling in fast. Markings she didn't recognize. She whispered under her breath, not again. Men poured out, not the same soldiers from before. Different uniforms, different weapons. And at their center, the captain. But this time, his hands were bound. A rifle butt slammed into his back, forcing him to his knees. Her stomach dropped. She couldn't hear everything, but the words carried through the wind. Desertion, theft, collaboration. The words made her blood run cold. The captain's head hung low. He said nothing. The officer standing over him loaded his weapon, slow, deliberate. Lena's pulse roared in her ears. She should stay quiet, stay hidden. But her hands, they wouldn't stop shaking. He had spared her. And now he was about to die for it. She pressed a hand against her mouth, biting back the panic. The world outside the window burned in silver moonlight. A gun cocked. And she knew mercy, once given, always comes back. Sometimes in the most dangerous way imaginable. She should have looked away. Should have stayed quiet, stayed hidden. But some things refuse to let you. The rifle's bolt slid forward with a metallic snap, that sliced through the desert air. The sound echoed in her skull. That same sound that had once meant another heartbeat gone, another soul erased. The captain knelt in the dirt, hands bound behind him. The headlights carved sharp lines across his face, exhaustion, guilt, quiet surrender. He wasn't resisting. He'd already accepted it. Lena's breath trembled in her chest as she watched from behind the cracked window of the diner. She should have walked away, but her mind wouldn't let her. Because somewhere deep down, she knew the truth. This man had chosen not to kill her. And now the world was paying him back for it. The officer standing above him barked something in clipped military tones. She couldn't catch every word, but the rhythm was cold, procedural. Desertion, theft, aiding the enemy. Then a pause. Sentence carried out immediately. Her fingers dug into the edge of the counter. The wood splintered under her nails. She could hear her pulse in her ears, a dull thunder building behind her ribs. The officer raised his weapon. And Lena moved. She didn't think, didn't plan, didn't breathe. Her body just remembered. The same way it remembered how to press gauze to a wound before panic set in, or how to whisper a prayer into a dying man's ear. She pushed through the diner door. The hinges groaned. Heads turned. Rifles followed. The officer froze, momentarily blinded by the glare of the headlights reflecting off her medic's badge. The insignia still clung to her sleeve, faded but unmistakable combat medic, Allied Unit 47. "Stop," she shouted. Her voice cracked in the dry air. All she could see was the barrel of the gun pointed at the captain's head. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her heart wouldn't obey. The officer's expression hardened. "Who are you?" "Medical Corps," she said quickly. "You can't." "Step back," he cut her off. "This is not your concern." Her boots crunched over the gravel as she took one step forward anyway. The world felt painfully quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "His men were starving," she said, her tone sharp but trembling. "You would have done the same if you'd seen what I saw." The officer turned, squinting at her through the dust. "You fed them." Her throat tightened. She didn't answer. He stepped closer, rifle still raised. "You fed deserters. You gave aid to traitors." He spat the words like poison. Lena's chest burned. "They weren't traitors," she said. "They were human." A ripple passed through the gathered soldiers. Some lowered their weapons slightly, unsure. Others exchanged uneasy glances, like men afraid of the cracks forming in their own orders. The officer's jaw tensed. He raised his gun higher. "You want to die with him, medic." The captain's voice finally broke the silence. "Enough." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Even bound, even beaten, his voice carried weight. He turned his head just enough to look at her, and for a heartbeat, the war fell away. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured. She shook her head. "Neither should you." He gave a small, sad smile. "You should have stayed inside." "And you should have eaten more than you did," she shot back softly. A hint of irony even now. Because that was Lena, always deflecting fear with something that sounded almost like courage. The officer snarled, kicking the captain's knee out from under him. The man fell, coughing into the dirt. The rifle leveled again. And Lena made her choice. "Wait," she cried, stepping directly into the beam of the headlights. Her voice rang across the silent outpost. "If you shoot him, you'll have to shoot me too." The wind picked up, hurling sand across the road. She stood there, small but unyielding, uniform torn, hair matted with dust, eyes bright with fury and fear. In that moment, she didn't look like a soldier. She looked like something older. Something the war had tried to erase and failed. The officer hesitated. A full second. Then two. Finally, he lowered the gun. "Take her," he ordered. Hands grabbed her arms before she could react. The butt of a rifle slammed into her side, driving the breath from her lungs. She stumbled, coughing, pain blooming sharp under her ribs. But she didn't scream. Not once. The captain shouted something, a warning, a plea, but another soldier silenced him with a blow. They shoved her to her knees beside him. The officer crouched down, his face inches from hers. "Do you know what mercy gets you out here, medic?" he said. She stared up at him, blood at the corner of her mouth, and whispered, "Peace, eventually." He struck her. The sound cracked like a whip through the desert night. She fell, dirt filling her mouth, blood hot on her cheek. The officer stood and motioned to the men. "Put them both in the transport. Command will deal with them." And just like that, the world went dark. When she woke, everything hurt. Her wrists burned from the restraints, her vision blurred by the pulse of a pounding headache. The truck jolted along the broken road, headlights cutting through the fog of sand and smoke. The air reeked of oil and metal. Across from her sat the captain, hands still bound. Blood streaked down from a cut above his eyebrow, but his gaze was calm, too calm. She realized, suddenly, that he'd accepted his fate long before she ever showed up. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. His voice was hoarse, dry. "They'll mark you as a sympathizer now. You'll never make it back." She leaned her head against the cold metal wall. "Maybe I was never meant to." He stared at her for a long moment. Then softer, "Why did you do it?" She looked down at her hands. The same hands that had sewn flesh back together, had held dying men, had shaken over too many graves. "Because you didn't pull the trigger," she whispered. "That has to count for something." He almost smiled, almost. The kind of smile that hurts more than it comforts. Outside, thunder rolled not from the sky, but from the distance. Engines, artillery, something big. The convoy slowed. Lena glanced toward the slit of the window. Dust clouds on the horizon. Too many. Her gut twisted. "That's not weather," she muttered. The captain leaned forward. He saw it too. Not sand. Smoke. A moment later, the first explosion ripped through the night. The truck swerved violently, tires screeching. Lena's body slammed against the wall. Screams erupted, gunfire. The vehicle lurched again, then flipped. Metal screamed, glass shattered. The world spun, sound and light and chaos folding together, until everything vanished into black. When the ringing in her ears faded, Lena opened her eyes to smoke and fire. The truck was on its side, flames licking the shattered windshield. The soldiers inside motionless. Her wrists were slick with blood from the ropes, but one of them had snapped during the crash. She pulled free, gasping, every movement agony. The captain was slumped against the wall, half-conscious, blood dripping from his temple. She crawled toward him, coughing through the smoke. "Stay with me," she rasped. His eyes fluttered open. "You should run," he groaned. "Not without you." Bullets cracked outside. Shadows moved beyond the smoke, silhouettes she didn't recognize. Different uniforms again, another faction, another storm. She reached for the latch, forcing the door open with her shoulder. The heat burned her palms. Outside, chaos raged, tracer fire, screaming engines, the desert glowing in flashes of orange. She dragged him out, half carrying his weight, staggering behind a sand berm. He tried to protest, but she cut him off. "Save it," she hissed. "You can yell at me later." They collapsed behind the cover of an overturned jeep. The world around them was disintegrating. Every explosion seemed closer than the last. And through it all, Lena felt one thought pulsing in her mind: Mercy isn't free. It never was. The captain's breathing was ragged. He looked at her, eyes glassy with pain. "You're going to get yourself killed," he said. "Maybe," she replied. "But at least I'll remember who I was." He stared at her for a long moment. And in that shattered, burning desert, surrounded by the ruin of men and their orders, the faintest trace of something human flickered back into his gaze. That night, they hid in the ruins of an old farmhouse miles from the crash site. The air was cold, the stars sharp and cruel. Lena cleaned his wounds with the last of her water, her hands shaking from exhaustion. Neither spoke for a long time. Words had lost their meaning out here. Finally he said, "They'll come looking." She nodded. "I know. You could leave me." "I could." He exhaled, almost laughing. "But you won't." She looked at him, really looked at him. At the dirt, the blood, the lines of a man who'd carried too much guilt for too long. "No," she said softly, "because someone once did that for me." He frowned, confused. "Who?" She stared into the dark horizon. "My brother," she whispered. "He died buying me 5 minutes to run. I didn't. I stayed. I've been trying to make that 5 minutes mean something ever since." He said nothing. But for the first time since she met him, his eyes held something like respect. Or maybe forgiveness. Outside, the wind howled over the ruins, low and mournful, carrying the smell of smoke and sand. Tomorrow would bring pursuit, maybe death. But for tonight, Mercy had survived one more day. Dawn came quietly. No gunfire, no engines, no shouting. Just the wind moving through the broken farmhouse, whispering across the empty fields like it was afraid to wake the dead. Lena stirred first. Her back ached, her throat burned, her uniform was still stiff with blood and dust. For a moment, she didn't know where she was: the crash, the firefight, the captain's body beside her, all blurred into a half-remembered fever dream. Then the ache in her ribs reminded her it was real. She sat up slowly, blinking at the sunlight spilling through the cracked wall. The desert stretched endlessly beyond, miles of sand and wreckage. No movement. She reached for the captain's wrist, pressing her fingers against his pulse. Still there, faint but steady. He slept with his arm draped over his chest, breathing shallow. The wound on his temple had stopped bleeding, but he'd lost color. She'd done what she could, cleaned, wrapped, prayed. But there was no medicine left, no painkillers, no IV. Only grit, willpower, and time. Lena leaned against the wall, staring at the horizon. Her stomach growled, the sound hollow and weak. They'd gone 2 days without food. Water was running out. Her mind flickered back to the diner, the tin of rations sitting under the dim light. She wondered if it was still there. If anyone had taken it. If mercy ever really lasted in a place like this. She heard him stir. "You're awake," she said quietly. His eyes opened, slow, hazy, but focused enough to find her face. "I thought," he paused, voice rasping, "you'd have gone." "I almost did," she replied, "but then I remembered who pushed me out of that truck before it rolled." He grunted, shifting to sit up. The effort drew a sharp breath through his teeth. "That wasn't heroism," he muttered, "reflex." She half smiled, "Good reflex." He gave a faint nod, eyes scanning the ruined room. The silence stretched between them until finally he asked, "How bad?" "Concussion," she said. "Bruised ribs, maybe worse, but you'll live." "Unlucky me." "Don't say that," she murmured. "You're the reason we both still have a chance." He looked at her, really looked. "You still believe that?" She met his gaze. "I have to." He nodded slowly, then reached into his jacket pocket. To her surprise, he pulled out a small, battered locket. Inside, a faded photograph of a woman and 2 children. My wife, my girls, he said. Haven't seen them in 3 years. Lena studied the photo, smiling faces, frozen in time. They think you're dead. Maybe, he said softly, maybe it's better that way. She frowned. You don't mean that. He looked out toward the rising sun. I was ordered to burn a village, he said quietly. Her breath caught. It was supposed to be an enemy weapons cache, he continued. Intel said hostile activity, but there were families, children. It was a trap. Command wanted to make an example. I couldn't do it. Lena felt the air leave her lungs. You refused. He nodded once. They called it insubordination, said I disobeyed a lawful order. When I tried to evacuate the civilians instead, they opened fire on us. She stared at him, speechless. And you ran. I tried to save who I could, he said. But in war, mercy's just another word for betrayal. The words hung in the dusty air between them. And in that moment, Lena understood. He wasn't a deserter. He was a man who'd chosen conscience over command. And now the war had marked him for it. She didn't speak for a while. Only the wind moved, carrying sand through the cracks in the wall. Finally she said, you did the right thing. He gave a bitter laugh. Right doesn't matter out here, medic. Only who's left to write the report. Her jaw tightened. I don't care what they write. I care about what's true. He looked at her, tired, wounded, but something behind his eyes softened. I used to care about that too. Then somewhere outside, a faint hum cut through the silence. A sound she knew instantly, mechanical, rhythmic, growing louder. Her stomach turned cold. Drone, she whispered. The captain's head snapped up. They both ducked low, crawling to the shattered window. Over the horizon, a metallic glint drifted in the sunlight, small, fast, circling. Recon. She grabbed the rifle from a fallen soldier's body, checking the magazine. Empty. Then she reached for her medical bag, still strapped by the door. Inside, 2 signal flares. She glanced at the captain. We have to move now. He pushed himself up, wincing, barely steady on his feet. Where? North, she said. The mountain ridge. The drones can't see through the granite if we make it there before they call in coordinates. He interrupted, voice low but firm. You won't make it carrying me. She glared at him. You're walking. I'll drag you if I have to. He smirked faintly despite the pain. You're stubborn. Lucky for you, she shot back. They slipped out through the back of the farmhouse, crouching low. The drone's hum grew sharper, angling toward their last position. The sun climbed higher, baking the sand. Every step was agony, her ribs throbbed, her throat dry as ash. The captain stumbled often, leaning on her shoulder. But neither stopped. The mountains loomed ahead, jagged, cruel, and distant. By midday, the drone was gone. But new sounds filled the air, engines. She froze. 2 armored transports kicking up dust trails, heading straight for the farmhouse they'd just left. She watched them through her binoculars, chest tight. They'll find the wreck, the captain muttered. And our footprints, she added. He turned to her, voice rough. You should go on without me. Stop saying that. Lena, he said, tone firmer now, if they find us both, you die for nothing. But if you make it to the ridge, you can call for evac. You can survive. She shook her head violently. I'm not leaving you behind. He stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. Why are you risking everything for me? Her answer was quiet, almost lost in the wind. Because someone has to remember what mercy looks like. He stared at her, the words hitting harder than any bullet. Then faintly he whispered, You sound like my wife. Before she could reply, the sound of engines roared louder. Too late. Lena's instincts took over. Run, she hissed. They scrambled toward the ridge, weaving through shattered dunes. Gunfire cracked behind them, short, precise bursts. Bullets kicked sand around their feet. Lena grabbed the captain's arm, dragging him behind a boulder. The world shrank to heartbeats, breaths, and gunfire. Her pulse thundered. She peeked around the rock, 3 soldiers, advancing fast. Her rifle was still empty. No backup, no chance. She yanked a flare from her pack. The captain frowned. "What are you doing?" "Buying time." Before he could stop her, she darted out from cover. The flare hissed to life in her hand, crimson light spilling across the dunes. She ran straight toward the oncoming troops, firing the flare high into the air. It wasn't a signal for help. It was bait. The soldiers turned their rifles on her, their mistake. Behind them, the captain had crawled toward the ridge, grabbing a fallen enemy's carbine. He fired short, accurate bursts. 2 went down instantly. The third hesitated just long enough for Lena to tackle him headfirst into the sand. They struggled, boots kicking, weapons clattering. He was stronger, she was faster. Her training kicked in, knee to the ribs, elbow to the throat. The man went limp. She gasped for air, heart racing, the flare dying beside her. The silence that followed was deafening. When she looked up, the captain was standing there, rifle smoking, his chest heaving. He stared at her like he'd just seen something impossible. "You're not just a medic," he said. She shrugged, wiping blood from her lip. "Field training, emergency defense, they call it optional. I call it necessary." He chuckled, a low, rasping sound that almost felt like life. For the first time, Lena smiled. But the moment didn't last. The sky above them darkened. A shadow passed over the sand, wide, mechanical and slow. Another drone. Bigger, heavier. Not recon, hunter. Her stomach dropped. "They found us." The captain looked up. "How far to the ridge?" 2 kilometers. He nodded, then handed her the rifle. "You lead, I'll cover." She hesitated. "You can't even stand straight." "I don't need to," he said. "I just need to buy you 5 minutes." Her throat tightened. Those words. Her brother's words. She shook her head, eyes glassy. "No, not again." He gave her a small, weary smile. "Go, don't waste it this time." The drone began to descend, engines whining like metal thunder. She could see the glint of its targeting sensors sweeping the ground. Lena's hand clenched around the rifle. Every instinct screamed to run, but her heart refused. She took a step forward, then another. "I'm not wasting it," she whispered. "I'm finishing what Mercy started." She turned toward the rising ridge and ran. Behind her, the drone's guns began to spin. And for the second time in her life, the desert echoed with the sound of one person choosing compassion over survival. The mountain swallowed her. By the time Lena reached the base of the ridge, her lungs burned and her legs trembled. The sun had fallen behind the rocks, throwing long shadows across the valley. Somewhere behind her, distant gunfire echoed, then silence. She didn't look back. Couldn't. Because some things you can't watch twice. The rifle felt heavy in her hands, too heavy. Each step sent pain lancing through her ribs. Sweat stung her eyes, but she kept moving up, over, through. She could still hear the drone in her mind, its metallic shriek mixing with the captain's last words. "Don't waste it this time." By the time she found a narrow cave at the ridge's base, the sky had turned violet. She collapsed inside, gasping, shaking. Her uniform was torn, her boots coated in dust, her fingers raw from the climb. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to cry. Not loud. Not desperate. Just quiet tears that ran down her cheeks and disappeared into the dirt. She didn't cry for fear, not even for pain. She cried because mercy always costs something, and she'd paid for it again. After a while, she wiped her face and looked around. The cave stretched deep, further than the light reached. She flicked on her small flashlight, its weak beam cutting through the dark. And that's when she saw it. A faint shimmer on the wall, metal, hidden beneath layers of sand and soot. Not rock. Steel. She stepped closer. There was an old insignia etched into the surface, half erased by time, a bird with outstretched wings over a fractured planet. She frowned. She'd seen that symbol once before, long ago, stamped on classified supply crates that had mysteriously vanished from her unit's inventory. A low hum vibrated through the floor. Then a voice, mechanical, low, almost polite. "Identify yourself." Lena froze. Her hand tightened around the rifle. "I said identify yourself." She shined the light upward. A camera lens blinked back at her from the wall, its red indicator flaring to life. "Corporal Lena Reyes," she said cautiously. "Allied Medical Corps, Serial 401 VA9. I'm not hostile." The hum deepened. A second later, the metal wall hissed and split open down the middle. A door. Cold air spilled out, not desert air, filtered sterile. She hesitated, then stepped through. The passage beyond led downward, carved straight into the mountain. The further she went, the louder the hum became, generators, power systems, the faint buzz of electricity. And then she saw lights. Rows of them, embedded in the ceiling. A whole underground structure hidden beneath the ridge. And standing in the corridor, 3 armed figures in mismatched uniforms. They raised their weapons instantly. "Stop right there," one barked. Lena froze, hands raised. "I'm unarmed, combat medic." One of them stepped forward, a woman with a shaved head and a pistol holster at her hip. Her eyes were sharp, suspicious. "Who sent you?" "No one," Lena said. I was captured. The convoy went down. I barely made it here." The woman studied her for a long moment, then motioned to the others. "Search her." They checked her gear, took the empty rifle, her canteen, her tags. The woman scanned them, then handed them back. "Allied issue," she muttered. "No transponders, no trackers." Finally, she holstered her weapon. "You're lucky you didn't walk into the wrong mountain. Follow me." Lena followed, her pulse pounding. The corridor opened into a large underground hangar, rusted vehicles, makeshift medical tents, crates of scavenged weapons. Men and women in mixed uniforms worked quietly under dim lights. Some wore insignias she recognized, others none at all. "Who are you people?" she asked softly. The woman glanced back at her. "Ghosts," she said simply. "What's left of the ones they tried to erase." Lena frowned. "Resistance." "Something like that." They led her into a side room where a man sat hunched over a table, covered in maps and old radio parts. He looked up when they entered. His beard was gray, his eyes hollow but alert. "Another stray?" he asked. "Found her near the west entrance," the woman replied. "Says she's medical, Allied Corps." He studied Lena for a moment. "You got a death wish, walking out there alone." "Didn't have much of a choice." He gestured for her to sit. "Name, Arden," he said. "I run what's left of this place. You said you came from a convoy." She nodded. "Transport Unit 39. It was ambushed yesterday." "Ambushed by who?" She hesitated. "Not sure. Different insignia. Might have been Internal Security Division." His expression darkened. "Then you're lucky to be breathing." She looked around the room. Maps of the region pinned to the walls. Red marks circling supply routes and old base coordinates. "How long have you been down here?" "Long enough to know the war's already lost," he said. "They just haven't written the report yet." Lena leaned forward. "I met someone, a captain. She hesitated. He disobeyed orders, tried to stop a civilian strike. They called him a traitor." Arden's gaze sharpened instantly. "What was his name?" "Didn't ask," she admitted. scar on his right cheek, about 40, used to lead a frontline regiment. Arden's voice dropped to a whisper. Jonah's Corps. The name sent a chill through her. You know him. Arden leaned back, rubbing a hand across his jaw. Everyone who's ever tried to end this war knows his name. He was the one who exposed the first chemical raid, the man who sent the footage to every network before command buried it. Lena's breath caught. That's why they called him a deserter. They had to, Arden said. He saw too much. For a moment, the room was silent, except for the faint hum of power cables. Lena felt the weight of it settle in her chest. He hadn't been running from guilt. He'd been running from the people who created it. She swallowed hard. He's alive, she said softly, or at least he was when I left him. Arden's eyes snapped up. Where? South Ridge, 3 clicks from the crash site. He was already on his feet. Myra, he barked to the woman, prep a scout team. She nodded, vanishing into the corridor. He turned back to Lena. You just did something dangerous, medic. Saving a man from execution was already dangerous, she said. He gave a thin smile. Fair point. Minutes later, a small team geared up, 2 scouts, a medic, and Lena. They rode out on old terrain bikes that growled through the dust. The air grew hotter as the sun climbed again. Lena's heart pounded the whole way. She kept replaying every sound from the night before, the drone, the gunfire, the silence afterward. When they reached the ridge, the world was still. The crash site was half buried in sand now. The drones were gone. The bodies, too. They spread out, searching. Lena scanned the ground for tracks, anything, a trail, a mark. Nothing. Then she saw it. Half buried near a dune, a small piece of torn fabric. A patch. The captain's insignia. She fell to her knees, brushing sand from the cloth. Her throat tightened. He was here, she whispered. Arden crouched beside her. Which means someone took him. She looked up confused. Took. He pointed at the sand tire tracks, faint but fresh, leading north. Internal security has mobile labs. They don't leave bodies behind when it's someone they want to question. Lena's stomach turned. They'll kill him. Not yet, Arden said grimly. First they'll try to make him recant what he knows. She clenched her fists. Then we get him back. He studied her, weighing something behind his eyes. You sure you're ready to die for a man you barely know? Lena looked at the horizon, the empty wasteland shimmering under the sun. I've been watching people die for men they barely know my entire career, she said. Maybe it's time I pick someone worth it. Arden gave a slow nod. Then you'll fit right in. They turned back toward the ridge, engines growling to life. As the team headed for the hidden base, Lena looked over her shoulder one last time. The sand shifted in the wind, covering their footprints, erasing the evidence that anyone had ever stood there. But in her chest, something stirred, an ache that felt almost like hope. Because for the first time since the war began, she wasn't just surviving. She was fighting for something that meant survival. That night, deep inside the mountain, she couldn't sleep. Every sound made her flinch, the hum of machinery, the murmur of distant voices. But beneath it all was a low, constant rhythm, her own heartbeat steady, defiant. She sat by the dim light of a battery lamp, staring at the torn insignia in her hand. It smelled of smoke and blood. She closed her fist around it, whispering to herself. Hold on, Captain, mercy's not finished yet. Outside, a storm began to build across the desert, lightning crawling over the horizon, thunder rolling like a warning. The world was shifting. And somewhere in the darkness, a man once condemned was still alive, waiting for the medic who refused to stop believing in him. The storm hit before dawn. Winds howled through the canyon, carrying sand like shards of glass. Inside the mountain, the lights flickered, generators straining against the power surge. Lena stood near the entrance tunnel, her hands shaking as she loaded her gear: medical pack, sidearm, spare radio batteries. Her reflection stared back at her in a cracked steel panel, dirt-streaked face, dark circles under her eyes, a soldier who looked older than her years. 6 months ago, she was patching bullet wounds in a field hospital. Now she was preparing to break into a government black site. She adjusted the strap on her shoulder. The insignia patch, Jonah's Corps' insignia, was sewn to her vest now. A reminder. A promise. Arden approached, pulling a hood over his head. "Convoy leaves in 5, he said. Lena nodded, tightening her gloves. "Where's the entry point?" He unrolled a weathered satellite map on a crate. "Facility buried under the old dam. No surface roads. You'll drop in from the East Gorge 3 clicks out. If our intel's right, Corps being held in Sublevel 3, Interrogation Wing." "If our intel's right," she repeated. He gave her a wry look. Out here, "if" is the only word that ever fits. Her stomach twisted. She studied the map again. Dozens of red-marked sectors, each labeled with letters she didn't recognize. "What's this one?" she asked, pointing at a dark-shaded zone near the dam's core. Arden hesitated. "That," he said quietly, "is what we're really after." She frowned. "You mean not just core?" His eyes met hers. "Command built that facility to erase evidence. Every war crime, every unauthorized strike, every civilian body that didn't fit their reports, stored, shredded, forgotten. Core's not just a prisoner. He's a witness." Her pulse quickened. "You think he has proof?" "I know he does," Arden said. "That's why they want him dead. He downloaded the after-action logs from the Malith campaign before they wiped the servers. Proof that command ordered chemical agents on populated zones. If we get him out, we get the files." The words hit her like a blow. She remembered Malith. She'd been stationed in a triage tent 20 miles from the strike zone. The wind had carried the gas for hours. When it reached them, the sky turned green. The screams never stopped. She swallowed hard. "I'll get him," she said. Arden nodded once. "You better, because if he dies, the truth dies with him." The convoy rolled out just as the storm broke. Thunder cracked over the mountains, lightning painting the desert in flashes of white. They moved in silence, 3 vehicles armored with scavenged plating, engines muffled to a low growl. Lena sat in the back, fingers wrapped around her rifle, the world outside vanishing in waves of rain and sand. Beside her sat Myra, the sharp-eyed woman who'd first found her. She was checking her sidearm, her expression unreadable. "You ever done something this stupid before?" Myra asked. "Once," Lena said. "Didn't end well." Myra smirked faintly. "Then you'll fit right in." They both looked out through the narrow view slit as the ridge passed. For a moment, Lena thought she saw movement, a flash of light far behind them. Drones. Maybe. Maybe just ghosts in the storm. By the time they reached the gorge, visibility had dropped to nothing. The vehicles parked under a rock overhang, engines rumbling to silence. The team dismounted, hoods up, weapons ready. Lena pulled her pack tight and followed the others through the wind. Sand clawed at her eyes and skin. She could barely hear herself think. They reached the edge of the gorge. Below them, darkness. The faint outline of the dam loomed in the distance, half buried in decades of dust and ruin. "Cable line goes down 200 feet, Myra shouted over the wind. "Watch your footing." Lena clipped her harness and started the descent. The air grew colder the deeper she went. Her gloves slipped on the wet rock, her breath fogging the visor. Halfway down, lightning lit the sky behind them, and for a second she saw the dam clearly. A massive scar of concrete and steel, half collapsed but still alive with light deep inside. Someone was home. By the time they reached the bottom, the storm's noise was distant thunder above. The team moved along a drainage tunnel, flashlights off, relying on night vision. Lena's heart hammered in her chest. Every echo sounded like footsteps, every shadow like eyes watching. They reached a sealed hatch embedded in the wall, rusted but intact. Myra knelt, pulling out a compact charge. "Stand back." The detonation was low, controlled, a soft thud followed by a hiss of vapor. The hatch groaned open. They slipped inside. The tunnel beyond was narrow, lined with pipes and flickering emergency lights. A faded sign read, "Restricted Access Level D Maintenance." The air smelled of metal, oil, and something faintly chemical. Arden's voice crackled over the comm. "You're in, keep to the maintenance levels. Cameras should be blind down there. Interrogation wing is northwest, 3 corridors, 2 security doors." "Copy," Myra whispered. They moved fast and quiet, weapons ready. Lena brought up the rear, eyes scanning every shadow. Her heartbeat was steady now, trained calm replacing fear. They reached the first door. Myra bypassed the keypad with a handheld splicer, a soft beep, then a click. Beyond it, the corridor widened. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The walls were white, too clean. And there were sounds now. Distant. Human. Lena's stomach turned as they passed a viewing window. Inside the adjacent room, a man lay strapped to a table under blinding light, electrodes on his temples, a monitor tracking his pulse. A guard watched from the corner, bored. Lena froze. "Is that?" Myra shook her head. "Not him, keep moving." They passed 2 more rooms before reaching a reinforced door marked Sublevel 3, high security. Myra crouched by the access panel, sweat glistening on her forehead. "This one's encrypted. Gimme 30 seconds." Lena scanned the hallway. Empty, too empty. Her instincts screamed. Something was wrong. Then she heard it, a faint metallic click behind them. She turned. A turret dropped from the ceiling, barrel spinning. "Down," she shouted. The corridor erupted in gunfire. Sparks rained from the walls. The team dove for cover. Myra slammed her splicer into the panel, hands flying. Lena returned fire, her shots ricocheting off the armored turret casing. Rounds chewed through the wall inches from her head. She felt the sting of shrapnel graze her shoulder. 5 seconds, Myra yelled. The turret rotated toward her. Lena fired until the rifle clicked empty. 3 seconds. 2. Then beep. The door hissed open. Myra rolled inside, dragging Lena with her. The blast doors slammed shut behind them, sealing out the gunfire. Lena slumped against the wall, chest heaving. Blood trickled from her arm. Myra tore a strip from her sleeve and tied it tight. "You good?" "I've been worse." They got up and followed the corridor deeper, until it opened into a larger chamber. Rows of cells lined the walls, each one sealed by reinforced glass. Dim lights flickered above. Lena's gaze darted from one face to another, some alive, some barely. And then, halfway down the row, she saw him. The captain. Jonah's core. Alive. He sat slumped on a bench, wrists bound, head bowed. His face was bruised, his uniform torn, but his eyes, when they lifted, still burned with that same quiet defiance. Lena pressed her hand to the glass. "Captain," she whispered. He blinked, disbelief flashing across his face. "Lena." Myra was already working the control panel. "They've got the locks routed to the central console. I can't." An alarm blared. Red lights flooded the corridor. Automatic doors slammed shut at both ends. Security breach detected. Containment initiated. "Move," Myra barked. Lena grabbed the nearest cover as guards flooded in through the far end. Gunfire erupted again, short bursts, disciplined. Myra hit the floor beside her, firing back. Jonas slammed his shoulder against the glass, shouting something they couldn't hear. Lena spotted the control terminal across the room, 20 meters away. Between them and it, 3 armed guards. She looked at Myra. "I can get it open. You'll get yourself killed. Then make it count." She bolted from cover. Rounds tore through the air around her. Sparks exploded from the floor. She slid behind a console, ducked low, and slammed her hand onto the interface. Manual override. Password required. She cursed under her breath. Then she remembered Jonas's locket. He'd used his family's initials as every code. She typed it in, AKM. The panel blinked green. Every cell door hissed open. Jonas staggered out, grabbing a fallen guard's weapon. "Lena." She turned and saw the officer leading the squad. The same one from the convoy. The man who'd nearly executed them both. His rifle was already raised. Jonas fired first. The officer went down hard. For a long moment, the only sound was the wail of the alarms and the hiss of the vents. Jonas looked at her, eyes wild with adrenaline and disbelief. "You came back." She smiled faintly through the blood and dust. Someone had to finish what Mercy started. He stared at her, then let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. But it didn't last. Myra's voice cut through the chaos. "Arden, we've got him, but the files aren't here. It's a decoy site." Static crackled on the comm. Arden's reply came back faint and urgent. "Then they moved them. Check the inner vault section Delta. You'll know it when you see it." Jonas frowned. "Delta, that's command-grade storage." Lena met his eyes. "Then that's where we go." They grabbed their weapons and moved fast down the next corridor, alarms still howling. Behind them, security teams regrouped. Ahead, deeper into the facility, the truth waited, buried under concrete and secrets. That night would mark the beginning of something neither of them could undo. Because what lay in Section Delta wasn't just evidence. It was the story of the war itself. Every lie, every death, every order signed in silence. And for the first time, Lena realized. Mercy might save lives, but truth could save souls. They ran through smoke and sirens. The walls shook as the security systems locked down section by section, sealing off their escape routes. Red lights pulsed like a heartbeat overhead. Every corridor looked the same, white, sterile, endless. Jonas moved ahead, rifle tight against his shoulder, his limp slowing him only slightly. Myra followed behind him, covering the rear. Lena kept close, pulse hammering in her throat, her breath loud inside her helmet. They reached an intersection. Jonas pointed left. "Vault's this way." "How do you know?" Myra shouted over the alarms. "Because I built part of it," he said, "before I saw what they were storing." They turned down the corridor. A metal door waited at the far end, larger, heavier, lined with reinforced plating. A sign above it read, SEC, Delta Archival Containment. Lena's heart raced. "That's it." Jonas nodded once. "Stay behind me." The door had no keypad, no handle, just a small biometric scanner and a red lens above it. Jonas stepped forward and pressed his palm against the plate. For a moment, nothing. Then a soft click. The lights turned green. The door split open. Cold air poured out, dry, recycled, heavy with the smell of dust and ozone. Inside was a cavernous chamber filled with rows of cylindrical data cores, each glowing faint blue. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Myra's jaw dropped. "God." Jonas stared at the room like a man facing his own ghost. "They said they erased everything," he murmured, "but they kept it all." Lena stepped closer to one of the cores. A tag at its base read, MALITH strike, after action footage classified. Her throat went dry. This is it, she whispered, all of it. Jonas knelt at a terminal, typing rapidly. We need to download as much as we can before they cut power. How long? Myra asked. 10 minutes if I'm lucky. They spread out, watching the door. The sound of boots and gunfire echoed faintly from the levels above. Every second felt stolen. Lena moved between the data cores, reading the tags. Each one was a grave. Each one a story that never made it home. VARON raid, civilian CASULTIS, REDACTD. Operation Falcon Sphere, friendly fire INCIDNTS. MALITH gas deployment, execution orders. Her stomach twisted. This is genocide, she whispered. Jonas's fingers never stopped moving. That's why they buried it. Truth doesn't die in war, it just gets classified. Lena stared at him. You could have stayed quiet, she said softly. You could have walked away. He looked up at her, eyes dark. I did once, and people died because I did. A loud clang cut through the room. Myra whipped around, weapon raised. Contact. The main door had begun to close again. Lockdown protocol re-engaged. Jonas cursed. They're overriding the system. Can you stop it? Not from here, he said, but there's a manual bypass near the power junction, down that corridor. Myra slung her rifle. I'll go. Jonas nodded. 2 minutes, no more. She sprinted off into the dark, boots echoing down the steel floor. Lena crouched beside Jonas, watching the progress bar on the terminal crawl upward. 23%. The numbers glowed against his pale, sweat-slicked face. He paused suddenly, glancing at her. Why did you come back for me? She hesitated. Because I couldn't let Mercy die where it started. He almost smiled. You sound like her, he said softly. Your wife. He nodded. She used to say the world doesn't change when men in power decide it should. It changes when people who have nothing left still choose to care. The words hung there, raw, quiet, real. Then the lights flickered. Static filled the air. The intercom crackled to life. A familiar voice. Cold, commanding. Captain Core, you're becoming a pattern, aren't you? Jonas froze. Lena looked around, searching for the speaker. The voice came from everywhere. You think you're saving them by exposing this. You're not. You're giving them chaos. You're giving them guilt. Jonas's jaw tightened. I'm giving them the truth. A low chuckle echoed through the speakers. Truth doesn't keep nations alive. Obedience does. Lena stepped forward, fury rising in her chest. Who is this? Your commanding officer, the voice replied. Major Halden, and you, Corporal Reyes, your file was quite something. Commendations, trauma reports, 2 failed psych evals. You were supposed to be reassigned months ago. I see you found another way to self-destruct. Lena's blood ran cold. Halden, the name she hadn't heard since the field hospital burned. She clenched her fists. You ordered the Malith strike. Correction, Halden said. I signed it, someone else carried it out. Jonas stepped between them, glaring up at the ceiling. Enough, you want me, I'm right here. Oh, I already have you, Halden replied. You and your little medic friend, and the one running through my lower corridors. She'll be dead in 30 seconds. Lena's eyes widened. Myra. She bolted toward the side corridor. Jonas shouted after her, but she didn't stop. The hall was long, the floor slick with condensation. At the far end, sparks rained from an electrical conduit. Myra was there, on her knees, bleeding from her shoulder, a soldier standing over her. Lena didn't think. She fired. The guard dropped. She ran to Myra's side. "You okay?" Myra gritted her teeth, pressing a hand to the wound. "It's a scratch, but the manual override there." Lena turned, a lever mounted on the wall locked with a pin. She yanked it hard. Sparks burst from the junction, lights flickering back to white. The alarm stopped. The door to the vault froze open. Back in the main chamber, Jonas exhaled in relief. "We've got a signal again. Downloads at 89%. Then came another sound. Low. Distant. Like the earth itself growling. Myra's eyes widened. "Self-destruct." Jonas's voice roared over the comm. "Halden's purging the vault." Lena looked at the flashing lights above. Red indicators now glowed over every data core. Auto-erasure engaged. "Jonas, we're coming back," she shouted. "Forget it," he replied. "If I stop the sequence, I can't make it out. Go." "No." "Lena," he said, voice breaking through static, "you came back for me. Don't waste it now. Get her out." She grabbed Myra's arm, hauling her up. "Move." They sprinted back down the corridor as the floor shuddered under them. Smoke poured from the vents. Fire alarms screamed. The vault behind them erupted in white light as the cores overloaded one by one. Lena stumbled, falling hard against the wall. Myra pulled her up, both gasping. Through the haze they saw him, Jonas, standing by the main terminal, still typing, still downloading. Flames danced behind him, the light painting his face in orange and gold. "Jonas," Lena screamed. He looked up. The faintest smile crossed his face. He held up a small data module, the kind that could fit in the palm of a hand. "Got it," he mouthed. And then the world exploded. The shockwave threw Lena backward into darkness. For a moment she heard nothing. No alarms, no fire, no sound, just her heartbeat. Then silence. She woke hours later under a collapsed beam. Her ears rang. Her mouth tasted of ash. Myra lay beside her, barely conscious but alive. The corridor was gone, half buried under rubble, smoke curling through cracks in the walls. "Jonas," Lena whispered. No answer. She crawled forward, dragging herself through the wreckage, calling his name until her voice gave out. Finally, through the dust, she saw movement, a hand. She clawed at the debris, pulling it away piece by piece until she uncovered him. He was still breathing. Barely. The data module was clutched in his fist. Lena pressed her forehead against his, tears cutting through the grime on her face. "You did it," she whispered. "You got it out." He coughed weakly. "Didn't do it alone." She shook her head. "Don't talk." His eyes fluttered open. "Promise me," he rasped. "Don't let them bury it again." "I promise." He nodded once, barely. Then his hand fell limp. Lena sat there in the wreckage, holding his head in her lap, the faint hum of collapsing machinery echoing around her. Myra stirred behind her, voice rough. "We have to go." Lena looked down at Jonas one last time. Then she took the data module from his hand, pressed it to her heart, and whispered, "Mercy's done her part. Now it's Truth's turn." She rose, helped Myra to her feet, and together they limped through the ruined tunnels toward the surface. Behind them, the facility burned, an inferno swallowing secrets that had lived too long in the dark. But in Lena's hands, one piece of it survived. Enough to change everything. When they emerged into the cold dawn, the storm had passed. The desert stretched out before them, washed clean by rain. In the distance, the horizon burned orange, and for the first time in years, Lena thought it looked almost peaceful. She stood there for a long time, wind tugging at her torn uniform, eyes on the rising sun. And quietly she said the words that had carried her through every battle, every loss, every impossible choice. Sometimes mercy isn't soft, it's a kind of rebellion. The desert didn't rest. By the time the smoke from the burning facility faded behind them, the sky had turned to silver ash. The storm had flattened the dunes into a single endless horizon. No landmarks, no direction, just the whisper of wind and the echo of loss. Lena walked ahead, boots sinking into wet sand, her uniform torn and scorched. Every step hurt. Her ribs ached from the blast, her throat burned from smoke, but she kept going, because in her pocket, pressed against her heart, was the data module. The proof. Jonas's proof. Myra followed a few meters behind, limping, her shoulders still bandaged with torn fabric. She carried what little gear they had left, a single canteen, half a clip of ammo, and a flare gun. They hadn't spoken since they'd escaped the mountain. Words felt small compared to what they'd lost. When the sun began to rise, Lena stopped on a ridge and looked back. The facility was gone, nothing left but a plume of smoke curling into the sky. The wind had already begun to erase their footprints. "Think they'll come after us?" Myra asked quietly. Lena didn't look away. "They already are." She turned, scanning the horizon. The faint hum of engines drifted through the air, distant, methodical. Recon patrols. Drones. They had hours, maybe less. "Arden's outpost," Myra said. "If we can reach the canyon line, he can extract us." Lena nodded. "Then we move." They walked until their shadows stretched long and thin across the sand. The desert heat returned, fierce and unforgiving. Sweat stung their wounds, sand bit into every seam of their gear. The canteen emptied by midday. Myra stumbled once, catching herself on Lena's arm. "We can't keep this pace." "We don't have a choice." "Jonas." Lena stopped. Her voice was soft but sharp. "Don't." Myra swallowed her words. The silence between them thickened. There were some names that hurt too much to say out loud. By late afternoon, the heat began to fade. Shadows crept across the dunes. They reached an old comms relay tower half buried in sand, metal bones jutting from the ground like a skeleton. They took shelter inside, crouching under the bent frame. The wind outside moaned through the wreckage like a voice. Myra sat with her back against the steel, breathing hard. "Tell me something," she said. "Why did you really come back for him?" Lena looked out at the horizon. "Because he was the first person in years who didn't look at me like a uniform." Myra nodded slowly. "And now you're carrying his ghost." Lena didn't deny it. She pulled the data module from her pocket and turned it over in her hand. The casing was scorched, the serial numbers half melted, but it still hummed faintly, alive. Myra leaned forward. "You ever wonder what's actually on it?" Lena shook her head. "No, I already know enough to hate it." They sat in silence. The hum of distant engines grew louder, then faded again, patrols sweeping the desert. Finally, Myra spoke. "You think Arden can still help us?" "He has to," Lena said. "It's the only chance we have." Night fell hard and fast. The stars came out one by one, sharp and clear against the dark. They started walking again, using the constellations to guide them north. The cold bit deep now, replacing heat with bone-aching chill. Hours passed in silence. Then headlights. Distant but closing. Lena grabbed Myra's arm and pulled her behind a ridge. 3 armored transports crawled across the desert below, their searchlights sweeping the sand like knives of white. Myra hissed, "How the hell did they find us?" Lena's fingers tightened around the module. "They didn't have to, they're tracking this." "Then ditch it." She turned to her, eyes fierce. "You don't throw away what people died for." Myra's voice cracked. "And what if we die for it next?" Lena looked at her for a long moment. Then she tucked the module deeper into her vest. "Then it still makes it worth something." They waited until the convoy vanished into the distance before moving again. By dawn, they reached the canyon's edge. The land dropped into a jagged maze of stone and shadow. Far below, a faint light flickered, a signal. Myra exhaled. That's him, Arden's people. Lena nodded. We made it. But as they started down the narrow path, a sharp whir filled the air. Then a red dot appeared on Lena's chest. She froze. Sniper scope. Down, Myra yelled. They dove behind a boulder as the first shot cracked through the canyon wall, splintering stone inches from Lena's face. The second followed, grazing Myra's helmet. Two shooters, Lena gasped. High ground. Myra peeked over the edge, fired two blind shots, then ducked. They're cutting us off. Lena's mind raced. They were pinned, no cover ahead, no retreat behind. And the data module in her vest might as well have been a beacon. Myra looked at her. Give it to me. No. I'm faster, she said. You're the medic, you stay alive, you tell his story. Lena shook her head. His story in this, not me. Another bullet cracked against the rock. Dust filled the air. The smell of ozone and stone filled her lungs. Then Lena saw it, a narrow ravine cutting across the canyon floor, half collapsed but open enough to crawl through. Follow me. They dropped low, scrambling across the dirt as bullets chased their heels. Lena's hands burned against the sharp rock, her ribs screaming in protest. But they made it to the gap, sliding inside just as another shot ricocheted above them. The tunnel was narrow and dark, the air heavy with the smell of earth and old oil. They crawled until they reached a small opening lit by the faintest glow of morning. Lena slumped against the wall, gasping. Her hands trembled, her mind spun. We can't keep running, Myra said. We'll die out here. Lena stared at the light ahead. No, she whispered, not out here. She reached into her pack, pulling out her last flare. Myra frowned. You're not thinking. I am. She fired the flare through the opening. It arced high into the pale sky, exploding in a burst of red light. Extraction signal, she said. If Arden's still alive, he'll see it. And if Command sees it first. Lena looked down at the data module in her hand. Then we fight. It didn't take long. The sound of engines returned louder, closer, from both directions. Dust clouds rose in the distance. Command had seen the signal. Myra chambered her rifle. We're surrounded. Lena glanced at her, calm despite the chaos closing in. Then we hold them long enough to send this through. She pulled out her radio, cracked, half broken, and connected the data port to the module. The small display flickered to life. Signal weak. Static hissed. Come on, she whispered. A voice broke through, faint, distorted but familiar. Raise that you. Her chest flooded with relief. Arden, we've got the proof. Jonah's got it out. Copy that, the voice said. But they're closing fast. Transmit everything you can. We'll boost your signal. She pressed the module into the radio port, typing commands with trembling fingers. Data began to stream. 1%. 2. 3. Myra fired over the ridge, shouting, They're flanking. Lena ducked low, guarding the radio with her body. Bullets tore through the rocks above. Her ears rang. The ground shook under the blast of a nearby grenade. 60%, she yelled. Lena, Myra shouted, move. She didn't. The radio crackled, static breaking through every other second. Arden's voice came again. Almost there, hold on. Lena closed her eyes, whispering to herself. Hold on, just hold on. A shot ripped through the air. Then silence. She looked up. Myra had fallen. The red flare smoke curled above her still body. For a moment, Lena couldn't breathe. She crawled to her, fingers shaking, pressing a hand to her neck. Nothing. The radio beeped. Transmission complete. She looked at the screen, tears blurring her vision. Jonas's data sent. The truth out. The roar of engines grew deafening. Armored trucks crested the ridge, soldiers pouring out, weapons drawn. Lena stood slowly, holding the radio in one hand, the module in the other. Dust swirled around her boots. Her face was streaked with blood and light. A commander stepped forward, shouting, "Drop it now." She didn't move. Behind her, the rising sun bled across the sky, casting everything in gold and crimson. She looked down at Myra's body, then back at them. Her voice was quiet. "You can kill me, but you can't kill what's already been sent." The commander hesitated. For a heartbeat, no one fired. And in that moment of stillness, that breath between life and death, Lena felt something break open inside her. Not fear. Not anger. Peace. The soldiers closed in. She pressed the module to her chest one last time and whispered, "Jonas, we did it." Then the world went white. It began with silence. The kind of silence that follows the end of a storm. No gunfire, no shouting, just wind moving over the empty desert, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke and iron. When the dust settled, the canyon floor was littered with broken steel and burned-out trucks. The patrol had withdrawn, leaving nothing behind but heat and echoes. And in the center of it all lay the radio. Still humming, still blinking. The transmission had gone through. Somewhere far from that wasteland, in a secure broadcast node buried beneath a ruined city, a signal cracked across the encrypted military network. Then it split, fracturing into thousands of pieces, scattering across satellites and emergency channels. It carried no code name, no origin stamp, only a file. Project Malith unredacted. And with it, every other file Jonas Core had risked his life to save. For hours, the networks burned. Every command console, every intelligence terminal. The images spilled through firewalls and monitors like light breaking through cracks in stone. Footage of civilians running through green mist. Children choking in the ruins of their homes. Soldiers removing their masks too late. And orders signed, stamped, confirmed. The world saw everything. 2 days later, the first public broadcast aired. A low-resolution feed, voice distorted, face hidden behind static. But the voice was unmistakable. It was hers. "If you're hearing this, the truth has already found you." The world stopped to listen. "My name is Lena Reyes. I was a combat medic, Allied Medical Corps. I was told we were saving lives, but we were burying them. The files you're seeing are real. They were buried beneath the dam in Sector 9. If you want to know who signed the orders, look at the last page." A pause. A long, heavy breath. "I won't be there when you do, but someone had to remember what mercy looked like." Then the feed ended. They never recovered her body. The desert took her the way it took everything, quietly, completely. But her name spread faster than any army ever had. Within a week, protests erupted across outposts and border cities. Officers refused deployment orders. Medical units laid down their gear and broadcast her message through their channels. The truth she died for had become the rebellion she never meant to start. Arden watched the world change from a cold bunker deep beneath the mountains. The radio still hissed with incoming transmissions. Reporters, defectors, ordinary soldiers sending proof, stories, fragments. He sat alone at a steel table, the flicker of a dim bulb reflecting in his tired eyes. Myra's empty dog tags hung beside his hand. In front of him, a small metal locket, tarnished, dented. Jonas Core. He opened it. Inside, the same faded photograph. A woman, 2 children, smiling. Arden stared at it for a long time. Then quietly he whispered, You made it count, old man. A soft static crackled through the comms line. A new signal coming in. He leaned forward. Channel open, he said. A voice came through, young, shaking, determined. Commander Arden, this is Private Hale, Northern Front. We received the Ray's broadcast. Orders came down to delete it, but we didn't. We're not deleting anything anymore. Arden exhaled, closing his eyes. Then she didn't die for nothing. No, sir, the voice said, she didn't. Far away, beyond borders and buried secrets, in a small, forgotten diner on a dirt road, the same place where it all began, a woman sat by the window with her child. The ceiling fan still creaked. The same sunlight spilled across the same scarred floorboards. On the counter sat a tin of rations, old, dented but polished clean. A young soldier, barely 20, entered the diner. His uniform was new, his face weary. He sat at the counter, ordered nothing, and just stared at that tin. The mother noticed. You can have it, she said softly. It's tradition here. He shook his head. No, ma'am. My mother told me about this place. Said a woman once gave up her food here and changed the whole war. The mother smiled faintly. And what do you think she was fighting for? He thought for a long time. Then said, for us to remember. Outside, the wind lifted a cloud of sand and carried it across the road. For a moment, it shimmered in the light, almost like a figure walking away, calm, unhurried, leaving peace in her wake. In the months that followed, tribunals began. Names were exposed. Major Haldon disappeared, hunted by the very soldiers he once commanded. Entire divisions dissolved overnight. The war didn't end, not yet. Wars never end cleanly. But something had shifted. Orders were questioned now. Missions delayed. And every new recruit learned the story of the medic who refused to stand down. Some called her a traitor. Some called her a saint. But those who had seen her face, those who had heard her voice crack as she spoke to the world, called her what she truly was. A reminder. Arden's last transmission went out 3 months later. It wasn't an order or a speech. It was a recording. One he'd found embedded deep in the data Jonas had saved. It was Lena's voice. Fainter this time, like she'd recorded it before the final assault. If this reaches anyone, remember this. Mercy doesn't mean weakness. It means refusing to let the world decide what kind of person you are. They can take everything, your home, your rank, your future, but not that. Never that. A pause. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The recording ended there. And across the fractured networks of a broken world, thousands of soldiers sat in silence. Some wept. Some prayed. Some simply stared at the flickering screen until it went dark. But every single one of them understood. Years later, when the war finally ended, they built a memorial in the canyon where she fell. Not grand. Just a stone marker. Her name carved simply. Lena Reys, medic. She chose mercy. People still left things there. Dog tags, letters, photographs. And always, a small tin of rations shining under the desert sun. Some say mercy doesn't belong in war. That compassion gets people killed. But every generation finds one soul stubborn enough to prove them wrong. Someone who decides that kindness can be a weapon too, sharper than hate, quieter than revenge. Lena was that soul. A soldier who didn't fight for glory or for orders, but for something harder. The belief that even in the ashes of cruelty, humanity could still flicker, faint, fragile but alive. And though her voice is gone now, her silence still speaks louder than the world that tried to bury her. Because mercy, once given, never really dies. It echoes through time, through people, through the hearts of those brave enough to listen. And in that quiet echo lies the truth she died to protect. That dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't boast. It doesn't beg to be seen. It just stands, wounded and unyielding, and does what needs to be done.